everyone. My name is Elizabeth Fitzsimons, and I'm Vice President of Leadership and Engagement at Lead San Diego. Welcome to our series, Leading in a New Reality, and I thank you all for joining us. I hope you and your loved ones are safe and healthy and that you're getting by okay and allowing yourself some grace and understanding because we're all learning and adjusting to this together. At Lead San Diego, we're all about connecting and educating and empowering leaders for positive change. And that's what we're trying to do here. Provide you with some support and some tools as you lead your teams and as you lead your families through these pretty uncharted and sometimes rough waters. Our partners on this series are experts on helping leaders and their teams reach their fullest potential. That's the team at Jones, and one of their team members is joining us today, and you'll meet her shortly. Last week, we spent some time talking about the loss of schedules and structures and how disorienting that has been for us. And we talked about the need to build new structures and schedules. That's going to be our focus today, creating those schedules and boundaries as leaders of teams and as leaders of families. Before we get started, I wanted to let you know that this webinar is being recorded. So we're going to post that video to YouTube and email the link afterwards for viewing later on, and you're welcome to share that with your network and with your friends and family. My colleague and lead program manager, Kim Wynn, is at the controls today. Hey, Kim.
Hi, I'm here.
So if you have questions, please send them to Kim and send those to her through our chat function, and we will try to get to as many of those as possible. We'll spend about 12 minutes of conversation with each of our two guests and then take questions from all of you for about 20 minutes or so. So I'm very pleased to introduce our guests today. They are among our most popular speakers in our real life in-person lead programs, so it's pretty fun to bring them to you virtually. Channelle McNutt is a consultant at Jones, our partner, with an expertise in organizational development. She has served as strategic advisor, facilitator, and consultant for nonprofit organizations and corporations, CBS, Edwards Life Sciences, Showtime, Edison, and SU. Channelle serves on the SS Midway Diversity and Inclusion Committee. She's mentored students in the entrepreneurship program for junior achievement, founded the National Association of Women's MBAs at SDSU, and is a 2017 graduate of Lead's San Diego Impact Program. Welcome, Channelle McNutt.
Thank you so much, Elizabeth. Hi, everyone.
Robin Toft is founder and CEO of Toft Group Executive Search. She has placed more than 500 executives at innovation-led companies in biotech, pharmaceuticals, diagnostics, medical devices, life science tools, and digital health. And Robin recently authored her first book, which is called We Can, The Executive Woman's Guide to Career Advancement. We Can offers practical insight, wisdom, and encouragement for women to realize the career of their dreams. Robin serves on multiple boards in town, and she is our chair of the lead board. Welcome, Robin Toft.
Thank you so much. I'm very proud to be here as the chairman of Lead San Diego and to support this very important communication.
Thank you both. Okay, so we're going to start with Robin. Robin, last week we talked about the lack of how disorienting all of that was, that these prescribed schedules and defined work times and school times and work weeks and weekends has been pulled away from us. And so as leaders, how do we create that new structure for our teams, while also being sensitive to the responsibilities that they may have at home and the demands that they have at home? How do we go about kind of creating something new?
I have a lot of experience with this because I've been running my own company with a very flexible calendar since the beginning of time, and this ability to work from a home office or a work office. And additionally, we work with hundreds of companies that actually, we give them guidance and we say, you know, allowing people to work from home is a distinct competitive advantage. And it's really something that you want to learn how to do. And up until this moment, everybody was very adverse to that. I think this is going to do wonders for industry because sometimes commuting and relocating is the hardest single thing that we have to worry about. So what I will say to answer Elizabeth's question is that we as leaders have to keep in mind that everybody's on 24/7 now. And not only that, but you're doing 2 and 3 roles at the same time in your same office, oftentimes homeschooling kids and worrying about groceries and all those sorts of things, because now your home is your office. And so I often say this to hiring managers. I say, if you're hiring the right people, they're working too much, not enough. So what we need to be sensitive to is, and I just want to give some ideas for creating stable and consistent rituals for people. So what we have always done here, and what I would recommend that you do if you don't do it already, is have a weekly staff meeting where everybody comes together, ideally on video, and you let everybody see each other. You can go around the virtual table and have everybody perhaps say a word about how they're feeling today, or elaborate upon that. You can have each of them report on projects that they may have taken on for you, and just have this start the week on a really strong foundation. Similarly, on Friday, maybe close the week with either a coffee or a happy hour where you each report on how you did against goals that you set up for yourselves. Bridge this distance with frequent communication. So if you're the leader, I would recommend calling all your direct reports every day, not to check on them, but to just tell them you're thinking about them and wonder how they're doing today. Seriously, you can just tell them an interesting piece of information that you just learned and touch that base. Also, setting up office hours for yourself with them, so you can block a few hours of your day, or you can set up individualized one-on-ones with your direct reports and just make sure that they know that's their time to bring you their concerns. In a time like this, I would also stay ahead of the game by inviting problems, not just solutions. I'm a huge champion of don't come to me unless you have not only the problem, but 2 to 3 potential solutions. I would tell them, in this crisis scenario that we're living in, let's not wait until it's a real problem. I'll brainstorm it with you. Also give a lot of positive feedback. So we have been always, every single team meeting we nominate a teamwork and leadership person of the week. And we just give them a coffee card. It doesn't have to be anything big, but they get recognized amongst their peers. And we kind of make a big deal of that. So, those are my ideas.
How are you, so can you go a little bit more into detail about what's happening at that weekly team meeting? Like, how are you sort of looking ahead? How are you setting some goals for what's happening that week?
Yeah, so we usually give up-to-date financial information. We give any specific announcements that I want to give to them. And we have each officer around the table or each participant in your team giving an update on their specific area. We actually have them send it in on Friday night so we can assemble a little agenda, send it out in advance. And then we usually have 3 or 4 teams going with projects so they can report on their projects to the rest. And then we always use the screen share. We use Zoom. And we share screen to, for instance, new client presentations or anything that we want to share with everyone and get their feedback. So it really feels like it's a live conference room, but the people are all in their individual windows.
So it's really not that much different from a team meeting that you're going to be having in the office, right?
Completely, yes.
So the thing that's different is that we are scattered.
Yeah, and we shouldn't worry about that because I think if you schedule in advance and they know to prepare for a staff meeting the way they typically would, and they have to look as if they're at the staff meeting and they should make, organized so that they won't be interrupted during this particular hour, it's useful.
Right. What about for those who are, so you're a pro at this, distance communication. What do you have to say to leaders who are new at this and who might be feeling a little bit of unease at, leading their team or feel a little awkward or, in this new time? Like what can you tell them about how do we normalize that and put that into practice?
So the single most important thing that all employees want is that you trust and empower me. And trust is really, really important when people are working at home. So I think as a leader, you go to them and you say, I am going to set and appreciate clear boundaries for me, and I expect you to will do the same with me for you. So just as an example, I'm going to take 1 hour every day for lunch with my family.
Okay.
And I'm going to be completely through working at 4:30 because I have to do something with my dog, whatever it is, right? And so you're very clear about, I have clear boundaries and I want you to have clear boundaries. Also, you have to tell them that you're completely okay if dogs or children walk into the frame at any time. You're totally cool with that because you appreciate that they're balancing a lot of needs. And then I would say schedule everything. I would tell them schedule everything onto your calendar, like make big blocks of time that you want to make outbound calls, or you want to do strategic planning for yourself, or you want to build in exercise to your calendar. Like, so if you have 1 hour every day that you exercise, put that in your calendar. It's okay. I really respect and appreciate that people are having to work bizarre hours right now, and you want to let them know that that's okay, as long as if you can reach them on their cell, even if they're out and about. So you're not watching where they are. I want you to be really clear about that. You're not calling them at 4:58 every day to see if they're sitting in their chair. You're cool with wherever they have to be at that moment in time, as long as they're getting their job done.
Right. How are you ensuring, when you're not able to drop into each other's offices, that things are moving along at the right tempo in order to meet expectations, whether that's, an internal client or an outside client, when you lose spontaneity of connection and collaboration?
That is the one thing most bosses worry about the most is, oh my God, if I can't see them, how do I know they're working? And that's why everybody's so put off by this. You need to allow flexibility of your employees. And seriously, I've been lecturing this to people for years. The only way to get there is to have performance-based goals for people. And I think a lot of organizations don't operate that way. But if you can think about, for each of your team members, either on a weekly or a monthly basis, setting up some SMART goals. So in the SMART language, they have to be specific, measurable, achievable, relevant, and time-bound. So they have to have a really clear expectation of when I expect this to be done. And that's kind of like what I said about the teams that we have set up. I allow them to choose who's going to be on their team, to establish the timeline for the team, and to tell me when the team can be done with the deliverable for the project. Everybody should operate this way. SMART goals are really, really important to have. They can be, as I said, weekly, quarterly, or monthly. Also, be sure you make agreements, not expectations of people. So, we're all famous for expecting someone's going to show up when you think they should. You have to get, as I say, the team or the person who works for you to tell you when they can be there, given the considerations that are going on, right, with what's going on with how they have to manage their day and their calendar. And once you guys agree, put the agreement in writing that this is what we agreed to, but make it so that they own it. Otherwise, they're going to feel it's unfair, because how in the world could I get this done when I'm balancing all these things like homeschooling?
Right. What about those leaders who are balancing the homeschooling? How do we make ourselves available to our teams when our schedules have shifted so much? And how do we communicate that to our teams? Like, hey, I used to have, my door was open, you could walk in, and now I'm like, out of pocket for hours at a time.
Yeah, I think over communication in today's era is the right way to do it. As a leader, you just need to be sharing what you have to do and what your calendar is permitting you to do. And again, you're not going to work any less hours per day. They're just going to be different hours per day. And just make sure you set up time that is either called office hours or one-on-ones where you actually get to speak with them, and they should assemble their questions and bring you their list. And this is their time.
Got it. Robin, what is one thing that leaders can put into practice today?
I would say a really rigorous communication plan, such that they are constantly communicating outward to their people about the ongoing challenges. And if that has to be an everyday touch base for 15 minutes when we get into the office, maybe it's that. But communication is the number one thing.
Great, thank you. All right, we're going to shift to Channelle. And Channelle, for me, this has been an interesting week because my three kids, their distance learning is really ramping up. And so figuring out this schedule has been an adventure, and it's in the works, but I think I'm getting some clarity around that. My question for you is how can parents and caregivers kind of shift their schedules and shift their work and maybe work more efficiently to accommodate those growing responsibilities at home? Like, how do we find what works for ourselves and for our teams and families?
I think, reflecting on the bio or the intro that you gave me, I think one of the newest roles in my life and the most challenging is being a new mom. So for everyone out there, I am a new mom. I have a 6-month-old baby. And like you said, Elizabeth, it's an adventure. And I think that mindset is so important about how we frame the challenges in which we're dealing with today. I think that's really, really important. I really appreciated what you said earlier about giving ourselves grace. And I think that that's extremely important. In your question about how do we shift our schedules and all of our overlapping identities and roles, I think the word to focus on is shift and being okay with that, right? Because like Robin said, we have all our calendars are full with professional and then we have the personal. And I think telling ourselves that it's okay to shift is really, really important. I think one way that I demonstrate this or practice this, my partner and I, his role in his work is very demanding, so is mine. And with a newborn, sometimes what's important to us comes second to caring for our child, especially a newborn. And so having those conversations about how do we prioritize is really important as parents, as professionals. I don't know about you all, but I was one of those people that had an overly ambitious list. Once COVID-19 started, I am going to do this and I am going to do that. And then it was like, you know what? I got 2 things done today and woo, I feel good. And so I think it's a balance of really recognizing, to Robin's point about what is achievable, what's smart, what can I accomplish? And right alongside that, what can my kids accomplish, right? We're thinking these are our little ones that are used to either going to school, being around their friends, they're in a completely new environment, and I have to adjust and they have to adjust. And so I think being flexible with that is really important. I'll give you an example for me of kind of how I shift the schedule. And I think important, especially in our work in Jones, one of the things that we constantly challenge leaders to do is to remove judgment. And I think that's really, really important in this time. It's understanding that different ages require different solutions, different families and the way you define family require different solutions. And so everybody's sense of safety is different during this time. And so for me, from my daughter really is up all day, 8 a.m. until 11 at night. And so my partner, his schedule he's full during that time too. And so one night she had finally gone to sleep. It was like 10:30. And I had gotten my laptop and I busted it out and I made myself a cup of coffee and I just went to town on the laptop. And my partner's like, what are you doing? It's 11:30. Shouldn't you be going to sleep? And then he paused and he said, wait, this is when you have the most free time, huh? And I'm like, ding, ding, ding. The moment that my child goes to sleep, that is when I become open, available. I have my time. And as I talk with colleagues and peers in different industries, it's about being flexible and comfortable with quote unquote untraditional hours, right? Mm-hmm. Some people are finding that they are most productive in the hours of 11 to 3, or maybe it's earlier, 6 a.m. to 9 a.m. And I think having more conversations around what that looks like for you is really important.
Can you give us some tips on how we navigate or how we broach those conversations with our co-parents, with our bosses? How do we sort of, attempt to ask for what we need?
Yeah. I think that was one thing that I was really thinking of, Robin, as you were answering some of your questions. And to build on that, I think in this time, clear communication and context is really, really important as we communicate with our teams, as we communicate with our partners. And so even, I'll give an example of virtual meetings, And I think how we communicate and establish new norms in these platforms is important, right? And so before we went on this live chat, I showed that, hey, my 6-month-old is sleeping. She might wake up. And in the event that she wakes up, I may have to either mute my screen, I may have to stop my video. And it doesn't mean that I'm not engaged, I'm not connected, but these are the dynamics that I'm dealing with. And this is what the support I need to be my best in this meeting. And I love that, the team was like, hey, it's okay, we'll work through it. And so I think for different teams, how we establish that and how we have those conversations are different based on the teams that we work in. Robin, to your point with our team meetings, right? That might be a great opportunity to talk about, hey, what are some behaviors that we want to see from our team to support us in the midst of this change, right? Hey, everyone, we've been spending a lot of time with calendars. Why don't we just go around quickly and talk about how we're managing our calendars and what different cues mean, right? Because for some people, they might be blocking out time. And if I haven't communicated what that means to my team, and that for some reason they try to schedule during that time, that could be an area for conflict or confusion. And so I think to really clear those things up is really important. And in one-on-ones, I think, Robin, you mentioned that earlier, that's a great opportunity. And for some of us, our leaders may be the one initiating that conversation. And for others, we, as the members of the team, might have to initiate it, right? And a great way to present it could be, hey, in the last week, I have been adjusting to, homeschooling my kids, trying to deliver on key projects for the team. These are some things that I'm thinking might help me. And just lay it out and ask for feedback. And I think that's a great time to collaborate on the how versus assuming that our team is going to understand how to do that. I hope that made sense. I feel like I said a lot of words, but I hope that that answers your
that
question.
really resonated with me. And I had a conversation with my boss this morning and said, hey, as I'm learning more about how this distance learning works, I'm finding that they really need my help in the morning. And I can be doing kind of work on the side, but it's not really the best time for me to be on Zoom calls or conference calls, so I'm going to start shifting those kind of meetings to the afternoon. And she was like, that's fine. That's great. So it's just, I think as you're starting to learn what's working and what's not working, getting that input from others is really helpful. And I think approaching things too as we're going to try this for now and see if it works.
Right.
And for this week, this is what I'm going to do. And if it doesn't work, then we're going to just tweak it, right?
Exactly.
Kind of trial and error. Channelle, what happens when you have, communicated your needs and your boundaries, and then those boundaries get pushed or broken?
Yeah. I think that is something that's probably happening more often than not. And I think one of the skills that we practice at Jones and we encourage our clients and our partners to practice is the skill of intent versus impact, right? And so to understand that right now people are operating with the best of intentions, and sometimes that impact on people may be received differently, may not be received in the way they intended. And so I think to keep in mind respectful boundaries and what may be considerate and respectful for me in this time may not be for you. And so I'm going to build on the example you used, Elizabeth, with regards to your scheduling, right? And so if I now am shifting my meetings in the afternoon and maybe one of my team members hasn't realized that adjustment, they might try to schedule that Zoom meeting in the morning. Right. And it's like, oh, I went through this. I said no Zoom meetings. And so there, I think it's a moment to have that conversation, right? Whether that's one-on-one, but as soon as it happens, say, hey, I'm not sure if you were aware of this. I shifted my schedule. This is how it's working. I'm happy to, meet this need in the event that, we didn't realize. But moving forward, I would love for you to respect, X, Y, and Z.
Got it. What kind of advice do you have for parents who are on their own with a little one or more than one little ones? What could they kind of put into practice during this time? Because they're not able to sort of share some of the time and responsibility. So how do they navigate this?
I think A big thing I would say is to be kind. I think everyone needs to be kind to themselves, but particularly single parents really need to practice just being gentle and understanding that you are not going to be able to do everything.
Yeah.
And that's okay. And even just repeating that to yourself seems like, oh, it's common sense, but we say it's not common. It's based on your comfort, your personal comfort, but understanding what your individual capacity is really important. And I think also identifying who is in your support, right? Who is it that, if there's a way, depending on the age of your child, if you have a child or if you're taking care of an elderly parent, who are the people that you lean on for that support? Is really, really critical. And I think identifying who you need in those moments is really, really important.
That's great advice. What's one thing that working parents can put into practice right now, Channelle?
Yeah, I was thinking about this. Okay, what a catchy. And I thought of reflect and restart. Right. I think when all of this happened with COVID-19, it was probably maybe 2 or 3 weeks ago or 4 weeks ago, depending on when you really had to start making significant transitions. And so I think right now is such a great time to pause and reflect and really ask yourselves, what's working for me? What's working for my family? And what isn't? And maybe identify 1 or 2 things that are working and not working. And then on the restart, what are some new things that you want to put into practice? I think that's a really, what do I want to reflect on? And what do I want to put a redo on? Because I think what we're learning is that flexibility and adjustment and change and how I navigate is so important. And I think that tool of reflection and restarting and starting new behaviors is really important.
That's great. Thank you.
Yeah.
So we're going to shift into taking questions from our audience, unless there was anything, Robin or Channelle, you wanted to add at this point that we didn't cover. Good to go.
I guess I'm just going to add one thing that probably should be mentioned. So I'm sure you're all feeling this way personally, that this is a good time to reassess your career and your life and your everything. So everybody's being super introspective in addition to having all this responsibility. So I would just say, put your arms around your people. If you have people reporting to you, make sure they are comfortable. Make sure you're checking in on them. You don't want to lose anyone right now. And, as an executive search professional, we know people are really unsettled right now, and it's an easy time to be talking to them. So, keep your people close.
Great advice. Here's a question. And I think this could probably, both of you could answer this one. What are tips people can use to communicate their boundaries firmly, especially when there are perceptions to be busy, or they feel afraid to be judged unfavorably professionally, or because of cultural backgrounds where they feel unable to challenge a superior?
Well, I'll dive into that. So I sense that we have a lot of overachievers on the meeting. I can't see all of you. But the biggest problem that most people face is this quest for perfection, and they worry so much about what other people think of them. I think, your main mission is to create value for your employer and to always be thinking about that. So I would say, if you show the right intention, you know what your employer's goals and objectives are, and you're lining yourself up behind them, don't fold to personal pressure that you're putting on yourself. I think so much of it is self-inflicted and imposed. So, just be your best self. Use this opportunity to speak clearly about the, as Elizabeth said, the blocks of time that you need for certain things, and that you're shifting, your work hours to a different time of day. But that should not have any bearing, and you shouldn't feel personally compromised. Seriously, we're all so hard on ourselves, and we are our own worst enemies.
I think too, and Channelle, you can speak to this, but I think there's just a lot of fear out there, and they're just the fear is just like hanging over everything that we're doing and thinking about, right?
Yeah.
So approaching that conversation, I think that there's going to be just an undercurrent of fear anyway.
Absolutely. And I think when I read that question, I think there's so many dynamics, feelings, and emotions that we are feeling when we are trying to advocate for ourselves. And when you are kind of feeling like I read that and I see the pressure or the assumption to be busy all the time, and that if I can't, I'm not executing on my job. And so then you start to feel that you aren't maintaining, that you aren't delivering. And I think, to build on what you said, Robin, some of these conversations require a lot of courage. And it's also about preserving your mental health and your personal health. And so depending on, your role, that's why I said, whether you're the leader of a team or a member of a team, it might take you to initiate that conversation, and understanding that it may not be accomplished or solved in one conversation, right? It might be something that we revisit, right? Maybe in the first one-on-one, I throw out the idea and I say, hey, you know what? We're not going to come up to a solution right now. Let's kind of put something into practice and circle back next week. And that way you give yourself some grace and some space to try things, but also to see how your team responds to those boundaries. But I think the first conversation that many teams need to have, whether it's in your small team or one-on-one or a trusted partner, is just to share best practices on how they are setting those boundaries. And what does it mean to have a boundary at work? Because for many people, this could be the first time that they're doing that.
True. This is a really interesting follow-up question because it comes from those without children. And this attendee is asking for advice to people without children who may, appear insensitive for wanting to stay within that regular work week of, 8 to 5. And because at this person's company, this person says, currently at my company, those without children are finding their schedule spanning 12 plus hours because parents at home are more available off hours. So can you go to that?
I want to go for that one. So just the reality is there should be enough overlap that the overlapped hours are the ones you have to deal with. So I think you need to get the group together and say, what we need to be cognizant of is that there are a lot of people flexing their calendar either early or late, and there's this block of time in the middle for which we should use for collective meetings. And we cannot suggest that people with or without children have to be available on certain fixed hours. And we cannot penalize people that are working, 8 to 5 as, our normal old calendar.
You're saying like a common time.
Yeah, the common time. So in any organization you have, and even in the areas, so we do a lot of work in San Francisco and in Boston where people work early or work late intentionally, there's an overlapped, 4 to 6 hours. Those are the hours we should be scheduling team meetings and things like that, right? And we should be really cognizant of the fact of we have a group of people working early, we have a group of people going late, and then we have the people in the middle. And let's make sure that we're all aware and we know what hours are okay for group meetings.
I think the term that comes to me, a form of conscious and unconscious bias that we often see leaders experience or team members experience, is one called benevolent bias. And benevolent bias says that, sometimes I will use things that I know about people to assume that I know what's right for them. So for example, with regards to being single or no kids, sometimes it may feel as if people are using that and saying, oh, well, because that person doesn't have, an elderly parent or children, they can work more. And then on the flip side, for folks who have children or different dynamics, it's like, oh, they can't work as much because of those dynamics. And I think what we have to do is really have that communication where people can speak their truth, not operate from a place of judgment or assumptions, and really get specific about the hours in which we are working. So for example, if I have someone on my team that is sending emails from 11 p.m. to 3 a.m., I don't want to assume that I also have to be up at 11 p.m. and 3 a.m., right? It's like, I can answer.
Unless you have the coffee and the baby sleeping, right?
It's like, no, but by no means are we saying, you know what, every hour of every day is free game and figure it out. No, I think that's where we have to get intentional about saying, okay, what are the expectations we have as a team, right? So for Zoom meetings, what are the hours that are going to work for folks? What is the majority? How are we going to be flexible with each other? And I think having those intentional conversations about expectations and communications in this virtual remote environment where things are changing is really important. And it's going to be something that's going to happen on a more consistent basis. and relying on those specific conversations rather than relying on assumptions. Because I think when we get into those assumptions, that's where you have people feeling that they have to overwork, overshow up, people get burnt out, they feel misunderstood. Mm-hmm. And I think what we're saying is pause, identify, and kind of clarify.
Yeah, make an agreement versus an expectation. So expectations will always end in disappointment, right? But if you've spoken about it and you have an agreement about how it's going to work, it's so much better, whether it's just you and one other person or you and a group of people. Call the meeting, suggest the meeting if you're not in charge of the dynamic, right? But let's make sure you guys get it out on the table and talk about it.
We have an ask for your thoughts on this from Nancy Rowland up at National University on our lead board. She says productivity of some of our teams are up 20%. It could be more focused work at home with less distractions, but she has a concern that people feel under pressure.
Okay, so I'll jump in. I think that it's a lot more efficient working at the home office. It just is because, yeah, you can throw in a load of laundry while you're doing work and you can, you know, it's fascinating how much more you can get done. Yeah, there's no commute. So it's not surprising to me that we have an enhanced productivity of people, believe it or not, even with kids running in and out and all that. Because one, we're stuck in the house. So, you know, the risk is low that you're, you know, going to the gym or something during the day. You're just not. And two, you know, there's no commute and there's no distraction. All of us know that, and this is why so many of my folks like to work in their home office instead, is that when you're in the office and your door is open, there are people stopping by all the time to talk to you. So that is an actual time consuming thing. So we can be more efficient. And, you know, I think that's not surprising to me.
I think to build on the question of concerning that people feel under pressure, if you feel that, I think sometimes if we lead with compassion and caring in the way that we check in with our team is really important. You know, acknowledge and praise them. Hey, you know, I really appreciate that you are showing up. We are getting things done as a team. At the same time, I want to make sure how you're doing, right? And start to, because one of the things that I think is really important is how we continue to build psychological safety on our teams so that people feel comfortable that if they aren't, you know, if they are feeling pressure and aren't feeling like they can hold it all, that they feel comfortable to bring that to us. And then on the vice versa, that they feel comfortable to say, you know what, I'm rocking it, I can handle it. And so how we create those conversations to build and strengthen safety on our teams is really important. And so if you're feeling like folks feel under pressure, you know, I would maybe ask in your one-on-ones, maybe find a way to bring it up at a team meeting and just get a gauge of where your team is at. And then that will give you information on how to move forward.
Robin, you touched on people using this time to kind of reimagine themselves. And we have a question about that. What's your advice for using this time of social distance to rethink things and take professional risks? What do you have to say about that?
I'm all about that just in general. I think that most of us suffer from not having enough time to go inside and really figure out how we feel about things. So this time when you're not allowed to see as many people, is just an amazingly fantastic time to be thinking about the career of your dreams, you know, where you'd like to take it from here, you know, what you need to do. So I always say I'm a huge advocate of the 80-20 rule. You spend 80% of your time creating a whole lot of value for your employer and the other 20% strategic planning, how to create more value for your employer and yourself. So there's always a self involved. If I create more value, then I can ask for more opportunity and I can plan that next step. So I think everyone's kind of doing that right now. And also I would advocate getting to the, am I really personally satisfied and content with the way I feel? Yeah.
Channelle, what do you think about, I think people are they're in their homes and they're like really thinking about their life choices, right?
Mm-hmm.
Is there like a maybe cool down period, like don't make any major decisions right now?
No major decisions during COVID. It's kind of like having surgery and you're under anesthetic.
Right.
To Robin's point, I think it's a very healthy conversation and just thoughts to have with yourself. I know for me, one of the things that I've been doing is just keeping a journal. Specifically, it's a gratitude journal just to reflect on all the things that I'm thankful for and the things that I want to shift in my life. I think with us and under this new dynamic, this new lifestyle, we are learning new things about ourselves,
Yes.
new things about our family, new things about the companies we work for. And I think that provides opportunity for growth. And I think if you can find a way to challenge it in a healthy, productive way, then I think that's awesome, right? I think for many people, for some people like Robin and myself, remote work was not a new concept, but for some people, this is the first time that their companies in a major way are having the transition to remote work. And so for people that are enjoying this or hating this, I'm learning that I either thrive in this environment or I don't, and so being open to that flexibility and what you're learning is huge.
I love that, being in the mindset of, learning and creating in these times. And could each of you kind of give us a forecast of what we're going to come out of this, how we're going to have developed as leaders, as parents? Like, how do you see us, leading differently after being through this?
So I don't know if you saw the Forbes article this week about the countries that did well in the COVID crisis being led by women. I thought it was pretty cool. But it was basically because they were leading differently with empathy and with consideration and not from an arrogant, egocentric, narcissistic place of leadership, right? So I think we're all going to come away from this, men, women, all better leaders, because we're going to have more empathy for the three-dimensional person that works for you. None of us are removed from our, I only value coaches that can talk to me about the whole three-dimensional me, not just my work life or my home life, right? It's all intertwined. So I think that's really important. I also wonder if we're ever going to come back to the workplace in the way that we were. I really fear for real estate, the corporate real estate, because a lot of our office space was unnecessary. And although we see lots of great benefit of seeing each other and sharing energy and intention, it is very efficient and effective to work from home. So, a lot of employers, I'll use Amgen in the LA basin, they had already really reduced 3 or 4 buildings, and they were making people just, come in and out and sit on couches during the day and, have a mobile office. And so, a lot of people had been going in that direction just from a cost standpoint, now that we're under cost pressure. And it's been proven that it actually can work in non-essential roles. I wonder if we're ever going to come back. So I think it's going to be much easier to talk to people about remote workers than it has in the past. So many of our really high intensity roles within biotech and life sciences and high tech are jobs for which the candidates have already dictated they get to live where they live. Regulatory affairs, medical directorship, they've already put themselves in that camp of I'm awesome and I'm going to live where I live, right? And I think there's going to be a lot more of that in the future.
I think for me, a few things stand out. I think one thing that I'm continuing to learn is just the importance of connections and relationships. I think for people that I talk to regularly, with whether it was at work or in my personal life, family and friends, I think I'm just a lot more appreciative of those people now, more than I ever have been before. And the need to rely on people. I think right alongside that, the appreciation for, people that are on the front lines of COVID-19, the nurses, the doctors, the people that are working in the grocery stores, not only for the people that are working and making those sacrifices, but I think too, the appreciation to go outside. I think people are gonna, we miss that and we crave that. I mean, the appreciation to spend time with our families, right? Our teachers, our educators. I think it's really provided new perspectives for people to shift and realign themselves with roles and identities that they haven't had to do. And so, you're really experiencing empathy in a whole new way, right? I think too, for me, it's just simple things that aren't so simple. Like my partner and I, something that was extremely rare was having family dinner. Like, it was not normal or consistent to have dinner regularly. But now in COVID-19, it's something that we've had for the first time in a long time. And it's just like, wow, we really have to make an effort to do more of this, because, in the midst of so much going on, you sometimes forget the people that you love, the people that you care about. And I think that this time is really emphasizing that.
I'm going to add something to that. As a woman who in my 50s lives alone now without a family, I chose never to have children. I am so envious of people that get to spend this time with their families. They have people with them in this dynamic. So be very, very grateful and thankful, and know that as hard as it has been to know yourself at whatever stage along the journey you are, it's equally as hard to know your spouse and their, what they're going through and all of that. But at least you get to be together in this time of crisis. So I know how hard it is, and yet I'm admiring of the people who get to spend this time with their families. It's awesome.
And I think
one word for it.
I have so much, so many of my friends, similar to you, Robin, I try to do my best to reach out to folks that don't have families, that are alone, living by themselves, because I think they're learning a little bit. They're experiencing this in an entirely different way. One of my best friends, single, he's like, I don't have a pet, I don't have a baby, I don't have a partner.
It's dramatic. And so those people are having a real aha moment, like, wow, So just be aware and appreciative of everybody's family dynamic. As hard as yours is, it's equally hard to be alone in this mess, right? So empathy.
Yeah, those are great messages. We have time for one more question. And this one is from Samantha Beck, our new lead director. And she's asking, you both mentioned the power of communication, which is so important now. How can we be sensitive and address with our employees and colleagues dealing with mental health issues personally or with their family at this time?
Wow, that's huge. So I would definitely bring it up with them on a one-on-one in a very empathetic way, and then try to connect them into the appropriate infrastructure wherever they work, right? Mental health should not be as taboo as it is. I've got a lot of history of that in our family, and we need to talk about it. We should not be brushing that under the rug, right? Depression, that's actually going to be the longer term outcome of this recession that we're in, is there will be a lot of long-term and long-standing effects. So if you're seeing signs of that, I would definitely get them connected to the appropriate support infrastructure in your organization, confidentially.
Mm-hmm. I think, we mentioned it earlier about, so much of what people are dealing with, we have no idea. And so I think to practice that compassion is really important, and consideration, and not knowing and understanding the different challenges people are dealing with mentally, personally, with themselves, with supporting their families, and just understanding that this is a time where people need care in ways that we haven't been there before. And so I think, to Robin's point, identifying resources for the members of your team, if they're available, and sometimes just checking in on people and letting them know that I care and I know that you're doing an amazing job. And two, at the same time, respecting those boundaries. I know I had a friend of mine today text, our group chat of friends, and she said, I'm just having a really hard time and I just need a few days by myself. If you could check in with me on 2 days, that would be great. Right. And so I think it's about how do we approach some of those conversations to respect and care for the people that we love. So I think that's really important.
People are losing people. I was mentioning we have a lot of ties to New York in my company, and people are losing parents and grandparents, and there's a lot going on with people. So again, you don't know how affected they are unless they volunteer it. But if you see the signs, be hyper aware right now.
And it's like Channelle said, it's creating that environment where, whether it's one-on-one or in a team setting, where people feel, welcome to share those kinds of things that are going on in their lives, right? Any other last thoughts or things I didn't ask you today that you are dying to share with our group?
No, I love this topic, and what I just want to say, please be careful and be safe. I know you've heard that to the nines, but you know, we've already had people affected in my company and on my team directly themselves. So it is here in California, and it is appropriate. I love that San Diegans are being careful about their health and taking it seriously, and we've done exceptionally well, but don't light up yet.
I think for me, just the message of you're not alone and that you have people to rely on and support. And if you need to make a phone call to a friend and just thank them for being in your life, then do that. I also think that, you know, just as Robin said, kind of be in the moment, be present. And as Elizabeth said, have grace for yourself, right? And I think the other takeaway I would say is do something for yourself. Unapologetically, not feeling selfish at it all, and just do it and own it, and just know that you have to take it day by day, and you're doing an amazing job in whatever you're doing.
That made me feel really good. Thank you. Thank you, Channelle and Robin, so much for sharing your time and your wisdom with us today. You're both such a delight. We'll be back, everyone, next week with a conversation about leveraging your strengths during this time with your teams and with your families. We have, our guests are going to be Amanda Flisher, strengths coach and frequent guest at our lead programs, and Nancy Maldonado from the Chicano Federation. She's CEO over there, and she's going to talk about tapping into the resources you have in your family, whether they are near or far. So I hope you tune in and join us next week. Thanks everyone for being here with us today, and I wish you all well.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye, Elizabeth.
Bye-bye.
Bye, everyone.
Bye.